Welcome back to my channel. Today I am excited. I personally think this is the most exciting video I've ever done. I'm going to go through my favourite reads of 2024 broke down by genres. A lot of you know I don't read one specific genre. I have a love of books and I like to try everything. So in this video there's going to be thrillers, romance, romantasy, fantasy, sci-fi, crime. There will be something for everyone. Each of these books will have left me obsessed in one way or another, and I want to break down exactly what it was about each book that left a lasting impression on me. Stick around till the end because the last genre for me breaks all the rules. It's a book that just stood out so much this year that it needs its own limelight. So whether you're into intense battles, heartwarming friendships, jaw-dropping twists, there's going to be something in here for everyone. Before we dive into books, I want to talk to you about how I chose all these books that I've got at the side of me. For each genre, I picked my favourite book that hooked me in one way or another. Whether it was the characters, the plot, the world building, or just something like unforgettable that left a lasting impression. As I go through each book, I'm going to separate it down into categories. So we'll look at the plot, where I'll go over storyline and pacing. Characters who bring the books to life, in my opinion. I am very character driven. The setting and the world building, especially in sci-fi and fantasy, because I am learning since diving into fantasy a bit more, that world building can be heavy. And I'm going to try my best to explain the writing style of the books as well, and go over the author's tone and the way that they tell the stories. And then lastly, and potentially most importantly, the emotional impact that each book had on me. So, whether you are just looking for a new recommendation in your favourite genre, or you want to be wild and dip your toe into a completely new genre, there's going to be something for everyone here. We are going to start with one of the biggest surprises this year for me, and that's the sci-fi genre. Before this book, I'd actually never read a sci-fi book, and someone recommended this book to me and said, give it a go. Am I glad I did? Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir was one of my favourite books this year, without a doubt. Starting with the plot of this book, where do you begin? Project Hail Mary follows Ryland Grace, who is a scientist, and he wakes up on a spaceship and just hasn't got the foggiest clue why he's there. As through the story his memory starts to return, he realises that he's actually the major themes included in this book, I would say, are survival is definitely the main one, cooperation, sacrifice, and in a weird way, almost like a search for understanding across cultural boundaries, which, if you've read it, you'll understand. If you haven't, you should. The memorable moments in this book for me when it comes to the plot, without question, is the evolving relationship between Ryland and Rocky, who is the side character in this book. It's just the most heartfelt relationship in any book I've ever read, bar none, and it just adds such a deep emotional dimension to the plot in the book. Now we're going to go on to the main characters. As I've said, I'm very character driven in any book that I read, but this book, more than any book I've probably ever read, it's the characters that made this book a 5-star read. Starting off with Ryland Grace. He is very much a reluctant hero. He's witty, he's resourceful, but he's also quite flawed. And he just makes him so relatable and likeable. His character arc throughout the story is just so well developed. Starting off as a scientist who's basically just been chucked in at deep end and ain't got a clue why he's there, to someone that's then willing to make sacrifices for a greater cause. Now we've got the star of the show, Rocky, and without giving too much away, Rocky is an alien engineer from a distant world Rocky is one of the most unique and beloved characters in recent sci-fi, if not any book in the history of literature. The way that Andy Weir in this book gives this alien voice and personality is just second to none. Despite being so alien, he's just crafted in a way that it's just so human. It's weird. I can't give you much more than that on this character because you need to read the book. That character just makes this book everything it is. And when it comes to the development of these characters throughout the story, Grace's journey from isolation to camaraderie with Rocky and his acceptance as his role in being humanity's last hope shows like insane character growth from start to finish. You see Grace from the get-go dealing with like difficult moral decisions. It just makes his character arc. It's just one of them satisfying character arcs when you're just happy. As I said, the relationship between Ryland and Rocky is, for me, the central highlight in this book. Their bond literally goes beyond language barriers, species, cultural difference. It showcases themes of mutual respect. It's just literally the heart of the book. When it comes to relatability, can I relate personally to a bloke up in space with an alien? No, I can't, but it's also written in a way where the characters just feel likeable and relatable. Now we're going to go into world building, and this is a difficult one for me because usually I struggle with world building and I get a bit bored. This entire book is set on a spaceship. That screams for me, Tyrone, you should be bored. The setting just feels immersive and believable. Even as someone that knows nothing about science, Andy Weir, the author, just uses descriptions in a way that you can just imagine being there surrounded by these pieces of apparatus that you haven't even got a clue what they are. There is some like hard sci-fi in it that I had to Google, but I honestly believe that you could quite easily read from start to the end of this book without needing to Google, and the stuff maybe you don't understand it just doesn't take away from the actual plot itself. When it comes down to the writing style, this is my first Andy Weir book, and I agree with the feedback I've seen online. He definitely is a witty writer. I just do this. I did. I've got kids. Also very conversational, which I love. I love dialogue in books. I think he balances the technical side of writing with humour and warmth as well when it comes to the characters. It just felt easy to follow. Actual dialogue between Grace and Rocky is just insane. Again, I'm trying not to give spoilers away. It is perfect. Just read it. When it comes to the emotional impact that this book will have on you, I think the book's emotional core just lies with the friendship that is built between Grace and Rocky. It's just one of them friendships in a book that you are just insanely, deeply invested in. Balance between humour and tension and camaraderie. It's just almost unexpectedly moving. It is. I just can't help but smile talking about this book. If I tried to pick a favourite passage or quote from this book, I just don't think I could. Any of the dialogue between these two characters is my favourite. The ending to this book is potentially my favourite ending to any book I've ever read in my entire life. On to thriller, and I've merged thriller with crime because most of the thrillers that I read tend to be crime, and easily Chris Carter, I've picked one by one, but I can't really pick between the first 5 books in this series. Just chose this one because it's my most recent one, and it's the one that's, I suppose, in my head still. One by One follows Detective Robert Hunter, who is the main character in Chris Carter's Robert Hunter series. I suppose the clue's in the name. And he faces probably his most terrifying case yet. It is a sadistic killer who contacts Robert Hunter right at the start of the book. He forces him to watch like really brutal unalivings on a live web feed. The first one, the killer, who is like absolutely cray-cray, makes Robert Hunter choose the way that this person is going to go. Now, when it comes to pacing in Chris Carter books, they are insane. They are so fast, way faster than my metabolism, obviously. They're just fast-paced, full of tension and suspense. One of them authors that pretty much every single chapter you get to the end of, there's like a twist. So you've got to keep going. And some of these chapters are literally 2-3 pages long. He almost gives you no time to catch a breath. When it comes to uniqueness, I think it's a difficult one when it comes to crime, police, procedural books, because a lot of them are whodunits, aren't they? They're very similar. When you look at Peter James, James Patterson, Chris Carter, they are all very similar, but I think what makes Chris Carter very unique is the detail and some of the graphic nature in these scenes. Like, they are, for some people, they're probably too much. For me, maybe I'm a little bit cray-cray, but I just think they're just mega. The back of that, when we look at the themes in this book, some people might struggle, I think, to read his work. There's a lot of evil in these books, psychological trauma, the cost of justice, and a lot of these unalivers in these books are almost trying to take justice into their own hands, which, yeah, it is just minging. There's a lot, or at least a big emphasis on emotional and ethical struggles, not just with Hunter in general, but also from the unalivers, because you do get chapters from Hunter and Garcia's perspective, but also it flicks to the serial unalivers' perspectives as well, so you get their own internal battles and thoughts. Memorable moments when it comes to the plot in this, pretty much every unaliving, like, they're gross, properly gross. Like, I watch films, I think it's easy when you watch a film to be like, sometimes with books, it takes a lot for me to be gippy. And Chris Carter has just got away writing scenes that are just gross. They're disgusting, but you want more of it. Does that make me gross and disgusting? Probably, but try to be good. When it comes to characters in this series, I'm going to mainly cover Hunter, because Robert Hunter is the main character. He has got a sidekick, we'll call him, called Garcia, but he wasn't in the books from the start, so I kind of know Hunter more at the minute than Garcia. Hunter is a insanely clever detective. He's emotionally resilient. He's kind of, and the only critique I would give is that most of the main characters in these kind of books are, but on the back of that, he does have quite a complex background and inner struggles from losses that he went through over his life, and they do start to go over that and build on him as a character throughout all the stories, which I think is pretty cool. Not only is he an absolutely fantastic profiler, but he is just quite a deep character. He feels like a lot of emotional weight, never stops working, he's just always on the go. There's a line in this book when he's talking to another police officer where they talk about the fact that they don't work a 9 to 5. The shift starts when they start the career and the shift ends when they end the career. And I'd say that's the best way to describe him as a character. Can I relate to these characters? Probably not. I'm not a serial unaliver and I'm not chasing serial unalivers, but I don't read books like this to try and relate to characters. When it comes to setting and world building, I don't expect a lot of world building in these kind of books, but it is set in Los Angeles. It gives kind of like a gritty, dark vibe. I think when it comes to world building, it's done quite well. The scenes aren't overly heavy on descriptions. It is more dialogue based, but it does a decent job of trying to set a scene. The whole atmosphere in the book, not just this book, but all the books I've read so far, are just like dark and ominous. It's of like being constantly watched. I'll read these books and every character I come across, I'm like, it's him, it's her, she did it. And I've been wrong most of the time, but it just has you on edge of your seat and you're always just suspicious. Even though there's not a lot of detail when it comes to world building and your surroundings, when it comes to the scenes of crime, it is gritty and it is deep. The only way I can describe it is just minging. And if you're from America or Australia or Canada, because I know I've got followers out there, that just means gross. It is properly... Chris Carter's writing style just sits well with me. It just works perfect. It is dark, it's gripping, it's direct. I just think the way that he writes suits the brutal nature of the stories that he tells. The tone is intense and suspenseful. It just almost creates like a constant race against time where you're always like, go on, Robert, go on, do it, get him. The writing is fast-paced. As I've said, it's got short, punchy chapters and a lot are left on cliffhangers. It avoids a lot of unnecessary detail. The dialogue that Chris Carter writes just feels natural. A lot of the time, I think you get an insight into the characters' personalities through the dialogue rather than through description. Conversations between Robert Hunter and the serial unalivers most of the time, I think, are one of my favourite parts of all of his books. Showcases like a psychological battle between the two of them. It's hard to talk about emotional impact when it comes to Chris Carter's books because I read his books for a good time. And that might sound weird because I've told you how minging these books are. But they're just so fast-paced, so engaging that I just can't help but be rooting for him. He's just such a cool character, and I'm yet to read a book written by Chris Carter where I'm bored. They're just so insane. If you love crime books, police procedural, anything like that, and you haven't tried him, just try him. He puts something in these books that gets you addicted, I'm telling you. Chris Carter, if you watch this video, you're a great bloke. Cheers, pal. Next up is my favourite fantasy read, and I think if I had to pick a top 3 read of the year, this would be one of them. It is The Sword of Kagan by M.L. Wang. This author is independently published, and I think I'd just come across this somewhere. It might have been a recommendation from one of you people on my inbox, because that's where most of my good recommendations come from. And I just took a stab in the dark with this book. I didn't know what to expect. I'd not really read the blurb. I just dove into it, and it was just such a pleasant surprise. The plot behind The Sword of Kagan follows the Matsuda family, focusing mainly on the young son Mamoru, I think that's what his name is, and his mum Misaki. Basically navigating their own personal struggles, but also preparing to defend their homeland of Kagan. I don't know if it's pronounced Kagan or Kaigan, but it's basically going to be getting imminently invaded. Covers themes of identity, loyalty, resilience. And when I say identity, especially from the mum's perspective, reading this book as a man, I felt empowered. I think reading this book as a woman would just hit completely different. The pacing in this book for me is absolutely perfect. It is a standalone. I think sometimes with standalone books it is difficult to build a world but also keep the pace there to be able to start and finish a story in one book. The author of this book, M.L. Wang, just does a perfect job. It combines some like insanely action-packed battles, slower reflective moments to give the characters time to grow. I think this book is definitely unique. At least it is for me. I've never read anything like this in my entire life. It's just got a blend of like Eastern inspired fantasy, modern relatable themes as well. There's like two worlds where they are set is very, there's no technology or anything there, but then there's a city further away where they're very technology savvy and heavy. The book is about warfare, but that's not all it's about. Now the story is about warfare, but it's not just about that. It's also about the cost of the warfare to the families and the communities in the surrounding area, which just pulls at your heart. It's the kind of book that will rip your heart out, chuck it on the floor, stand on it, pick it back up and try and put it back in before trying to rip it back out again. It's one of them. Themes in this book, where do I start? Sacrifice, honour, family bonds, cultural difference versus modern society, if that's the thing. Self-discovery. It's just all of it. It's everything. Memorable moments in this book for me. Probably relationship between the mum and the dad in the family. The way that progressed through the story was just insane. The battle scenes, they're battling. Like, it is, you're on edge of your seat and you're just like, whoa. There's so much in this book that's incredible. When it comes to the characters, my favourite character, without a doubt, is Misaki, who is the mum of the Matsuda family. She is a mother, but also a skilled fighter with a past. Has such a complex character arc. She really struggles throughout the entire story of the expectations of being a mother and doesn't see herself just as a stay-at-home mum who's going to cook and clean. She wants to go out there and do more for her son, her family, and her entire community. I think the book probably centres more around like journey of rediscovery. It's beautiful, honestly. It's so nice to read. emotional, it's powerful, and as a man sat in England, like, I resonated with her. As a woman sat in hills in this made up place that sounds a bit like China or Japan. It's wicked. Mamoru is her son, and he's very much been bred to be a warrior. He is young, he's idealistic, he's just a warrior in training. Absolutely idolises the Kagan traditions, which is that mums stay at home, dads are warriors, sons grow up to be dads. Starts as this young, naive boy, but he grows immensely throughout the story, both as a young fighter and as a person as well. His character arc is touching, and also serves as probably one of the most heartbreaking arcs in this story. The development that they go through in this book is just second to none. Of all these books I've got here, I think the story of how a character can change so much through a story, it's just untouched. It's insane. The relationship between mum and son, for me, is probably central when it comes to the relationships in the story. Although I love the relationship between mum and dad, the relationship between mum and son is beautiful. I know I say the word beautiful in this book a lot, but it really is. She was so desperate to have a daughter that she never got. And to see the relationship grow and to see her as a mum start to appreciate the beauty of having a son. Can I relate to it? Yeah, maybe. I've got kids, and I understand how it can be as a dad as opposed to a mum, and how we can get into the roles. But other than that, no, I can't relate to it. You know, I'm not a samurai warrior living in woods, but I don't need to relate to every single book for me to love it. It is just beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful is the word that I would describe this book. I know I've said it a few times, but it is just beautiful. Great fit. The atmosphere is fantastic. The world building for me is perfect. I could just imagine myself in one of them fancy buildings in middle of countryside in China. Like, that's what I can picture in there. And if an author can put a picture into my head and I can close my eyes and I feel like I'm there, that's world building done. Tick, well done. The magic system is cool. I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's very unique, but it isn't just rinse and repeat of a lot of the other fantasy books that you read. There's a blood magic system which allows wielders to manipulate water and ice. It's intricate, but it's also got strict limitations. It adds like an element of realism. Can you say realism when it's magic? It's obviously not real, but it's just not. It's not OTT. It's not like, oh, they can do everything. It's just great. I find the writing style brilliant. Wang's writing prose is emotional. It just draws you in. Like, this is one of them books that you're just going to read and you're just not going to want to stop. You don't want to laugh, you just want to read. The dialogue between the characters just feels natural. Like, a lot of the conversations are just deeply emotional. Like, cultural nuances. Like, you can just tell that the link between the dialogue and the world building is there. Like, it just feels like they're communicating the way that they should, based on where they are, if that makes any sense to you. Now, emotional impact in this book. Yeah, it's emotionally impacting. Like, you're going to cry. It is. ML Wang's going to hit you. I've told you. Heart out, floor, up, try and build it, back in, out. It's just one of them. Just read it. It's very good. Coming to Romantasy. I went through a stage where I read a lot of Romantasy books, and this is going to be an unpopular opinion, I think. Maybe not. Boom, Fourth Wing. Because dragons. Yeah, I have read quite a few Romantasy this year. Fate Inked in Blood, Akatar, Fourth Wing, Serpent of the Wings of Night. For me, this was my favourite, and I'm going to explain to you why. If you haven't read Fourth Wing, it is a story about a young girl called Violet Sorrengail. And this young girl, and one of the reasons I love this book so much, has a chronic illness that makes her physically fragile. This illness, I think it's called EDS, but it's the same illness that the author Rebecca Yarros also has. And I am all for a bit of disability awareness in books. I don't think there's enough disabled characters in fantasy books. Now, this young and physically fragile girl always dreamed of being a scribe, which is basically working with books in this war college. But her mum's like, nah, 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 mate, you are going to be a dragon rider. She's like, say it again. Despite all her conditions, she goes to this war college to try and train to become a dragon rider. She faces physical and social challenges because her mum is like really high up in this school. Her sister is a famous dragon rider, and because of that, she's just tried a bit different. And one of the main characters in the book starts off hating her. The pacing in this book for me is perfect. I think it moves quite quickly. I think it balances high stakes and scenes with character focused moments. I think Rebecca Yarros has just done a really good job at getting a sense of urgency in the book, and it just feels like that, like you are along at the same pace as Violet is, because everything for her is just here and there. She's getting hit from all angles. She's facing so many challenges. When it comes to uniqueness, this is a tricky one because I've read a lot of articles online and a lot of people online that say that this book is basically a mishmash of loads of different books like Divergent and Harry Potter and Hunger Games. I haven't read all them books, so I don't know. For me, it felt unique. I've personally never read a book about a disabled character going to a dragon rider school and overcoming the odds that she did. I'm not saying it's a unique book. If you have read all them other and you believe that this book is a mishmash of all them, cool. But growing up, I always said Harry Potter was one of my favourite series ever as a kid. And I always said I'd love something similar to Harry Potter growing up. And it just gave me them vibes. Maybe it's the academia setting when they're at school and they're overcoming challenges. But I loved it. And I read for me, I don't read for other people. I think this story for me just showcases how internal strength can absolutely overcome physical strength. Memorable moments for me in this book, without spoiling it, so hard. If you've read the book, you'll know what I mean. Violet, boss bitch, and there's other people in front of her, and then out of nowhere, one turns up, and yeah, memorable moment. Oh, that got me out of my seat. Going over the characters in this book. Firstly, as I said, you've got Violet Sorrengail. I've pretty much told you who she is. She's a disabled, strong, like emotionally strong, mentally strong female character. But she is also fragile. She breaks easily, she hurts easily, but she just doesn't let it stop her. And I just enjoyed her character throughout. Then you've got Shadow Daddy, Xaden Riorson, who the girls go wild for. And some guys as well. I don't hate, don't discriminate. I think he's kind of sexy too. He is just a broody and powerful dragon rider. He's like the alpha bro. Everyone loves him. He's hated by no one really, although he used to be because he came into the school in bad circumstances. There was a big uprising and all of the families who were part of the uprising, their kids were basically forced into this school and he was one of them children. It is just an enemies to lovers kind of storyline. Like, he starts off and he's feral. He's just vile, he is. But you also can't help but love him. And he's got a neck tattoo as well, and I think people are into that, aren't they? So you've got Dane Atos, who is the good guy. The guy that... I did that again, I'm so sorry. Is the guy that you initially think, oh, Violet, he's the one. He's a cringe monster. He is very, very overprotective, overbearing. Doesn't want to give Violet a chance to breathe. He's just like, Violet, I want to save you. Violet, I'm here for you. Violet, I love you. He's just that guy. Of the show when it comes to character development is obviously Violet. Violet's character from wannabe scribe to dragon rider is just insane. I absolutely adored it. Some people come in my comments sometimes and they're like, oh, it's overhyped or whatever. You do you, boo-boo. I'm allowed to like what I like, and I like it. The building and the setting, for me, is great. It feels like a really harsh and competitive environment, the whole school. I think the setting just helps emphasise Violet's struggles and her physical limitations as well, one of which is trying to get onto a dragon. Outside the college is full of political intrigue, which is new to me because I'm relatively new to fantasy, so I'm not used to the politics of some fantasy books. And dragon lore as well, because this, I believe, is my first book that I'd ever read with dragons in it. It's a dragon noise, not a cat. The writing style of this book, I loved, and this is where I think this divides opinion. A lot of people say that Rebecca Yarros is not a great writer. I don't know what makes a great writer. I'm not an author, and I don't know that me or other content creators are qualified to say that an author is bad at writing. It flowed for me. The dialogue was great. It was in first person POV. I enjoy first person POV a lot easier. I find it easier to imagine the setting when it says I am doing something as opposed to she is doing something. So if it is poorly written, that's not what I look for in books. If I'm going to read a book and try and break a book down, then yeah, I might consider the writing prose and the writing style and grammatical errors. I'm not reading this book for that. Emotional impact. Yeah, again, this is impacting. Like, there were a lot of moments in this book where I got up, I was screaming. My wife was like, "What are you doing?" I'm just like, she's bonded with a dragon. It's crazy. Like, there are some scenes in here where you're just like, yes, you just can't help it, or at least I can't help it anyway. If you read it and you say Tyrone, like, I'm not getting it, then maybe I'm just wrong. But this book slapped for me. Relatability. Can I relate? No, I can't. I'm not disabled, I'm not a female, and I'm not a dragon rider. I love the book. Next up, non-fiction. I know some of you out there like to read non-fiction, and from time to time I do as well. Most of my non-fiction books are usually based around World War II. I'm obsessed with that sort of stuff. And my favourite historical non-fiction this year was this book here, The Survivor by Joseph Laukowitz. I'm not very good with that name. Anyway, that's what his name is there if you want to try and pronounce it better than me. This book is absolutely fantastic. It's heart-wrenching. It is just eerie, as every other World War II inspired non-fiction book is. This follows this man. He is the narrator of said book. It's his experience through not just one, but multiple Nazi concentration camps in World War II. From loads that I had never even heard of. Krakow to Plaszow. Anyone can correct me on these pronunciations. I just say it as I see it. Mauthausen, another one. Ebensee. And the obvious ones like Auschwitz and Birkenau. Just faces the most horrific conditions. It's brutal. It's disgusting. That loss that this man suffers it's horrible. Just defies all odds how he survived the ordeal. But what's different for me about this book compared to a lot of other Auschwitz World War II inspired books is his journey continues after the liberation, and it goes into more detail about what he did to try and help after keeping the concentration camps. He actually goes on to become an investigator who works with other people to try and track down the betrayers in the concentration camps, and it's so cool. Pacing is just perfect. It's fast paced, also like weighty. There's a lot of heavy stuff that's covered in this book. It just keeps you engaged. Like, I couldn't help but just keep turning pages. It is harrowing. Some of the stuff in this book is harrowing. Every single chapter just unfolds with like urgency. It's almost like Joseph, the guy that went through this, is just desperately trying to tell you his story as detailed but also as directly and quickly as possible. Unique, potentially not, but then yeah, it's not unique in a sense that if you read non-fiction, you've probably read a lot of Auschwitz stories, but then it is unique because every single person that went through the concentration camps had their own story to tell. And I think it's so important that these people, relatives of these people, still come out and tell these stories to hopefully stop stuff like this from happening again. Things like this can still happen now and still do happen now. There are atrocities going on across the world, and I think unless these stories are put out to the world, things like this will continue to happen. If people know that there are repercussions and that people will talk, hopefully things like this just will stop happening. I don't think I need to go through the themes that you're going to see in this book. Like, the themes are heavy. They're not easy to read. There's resilience, there's fight for justice, there's memory and dignity. Like, the things that some of these people were put through, no human should have to go through these things. You just lose all dignity. It covers the emotional and psychological scars that are left behind when you go through this amount of trauma. And on the back of that, the strength and determination of him to try and confront the evil that made him the person that he was. I can't give you an emotional moment or a favourite moment in this book, because from start to finish, this book, I just adored it. Like, this man is just heroic. I imagine his family are just so proud of the man that he was. It's just insane. When it comes to the characters in this book, Joseph is obviously a stage. He provides, as the narrator of the book, a deeply personal, honest account of everything that he went through. His resilience, intelligence, and moral courage just define everything that he is as a person. I think he as a person, and the way that he narrates the book, is just the perfect way to try and you in the situation that he was put in. Various other figures that he meets throughout the camps add a bit of depth and context to the narrative. What they do highlight is his compassion. The character development is just beautiful. To see him go from a young man through everything that he went through in all the camps to everything that he went through later on in life trying to catch the Nazis, it's just amazing to know that there are people out there that go through these things and still keep fighting day to day. Now, as a man that suffers with his own mental health problems, I try and remind myself on a daily basis when I'm having my struggles how fortunate and blessed I am to live in a society where I'm safe. And not everyone gets that opportunity, so sometimes it's a bit of a reality check for me to try and read these books, just to make sure I've got the gratitude to have healthy kids, a beautiful wife, a home. Like, not everyone gets these luxuries, and these are luxuries. I think sometimes we forget as humans, having a roof over our head, having central heating, having a camera to record something and to be able to communicate with people across the other side of the world. These are luxuries that aren't afforded to everyone in this world, and these books for me remind me of that. I can't obviously relate to Joseph as a character. I've not been through half the things, even a percentage of the things that this man has been through. Do appreciate that I have family that have been through similar things. My wife's nan's husband was captured by the Nazis, and he used to tell stories. I say used to, he's 91 now, and he tells stories that are now passed down the generations, and in one way or another, these stories will absolutely relate to a lot of families, and so a lot of families that probably don't know the history of what happened in World War II because their relatives might not have survived the war, or if they did survive the war, didn't want to talk about it because of the brutality of the things that they went through. So I think in one way or another, if we can't relate to it, we will know somebody that was affected by this war. When it comes to setting and world building, not going to get that in these kind of books because it was what it was. You know, they will describe the camps, they will describe the areas, they will describe the clothes that the soldiers were wearing, the smells around the camps. It is very much the same because it's an honest view of what these camps were like. They were gross, they were minging, they were put in the worst conditions that no human should have to be put into. And it's described in a way that you fully understand and appreciate what they went through. Writing style is the same as what you would expect in most memoirs. It is personal, it's honest. Voice just carries so much weight. Also reflects resilience in his dedication to justice at the end of the book. Again, when it comes to emotional impact, this is one of them books that you're going to need to be in the right place to read. If you're in a bad place mentally, it's not the kind of book that you want to pick up. I will not pick this book up to try and make me feel better when I'm in a bad emotional and mental state. However, when I'm in a good place, I will pick this up just to try and remind me, as I said, of how fortunate I am, in the hope that when I am having bad mental health days, that I can just remind myself that I'm blessed. Before I get on to the honourable mention, and probably my favourite read this year, I just want to give two other mentions to two other books from two different genres. I've not broke them down in this book because they are my favourite books in each genre, but they're not books that blew me away, if that makes any sense. So when it comes to horror, Hidden Pictures by Jason Rakulek, I think his name is, was a brilliant read this year. I think I rated it 4-star, but I didn't want to break it down because it just didn't have the same impact on me as some of these other books. And when it comes to the romance genre, I am quite new to romance books, and my favourite book this year in the romance genre was Binding 13 by Chloe Walsh. Again, I didn't want to break that down, although I had a fantastic time, and the nostalgia in that book and some of the themes in that book are quite hard hitting. For me, a romance book just shouldn't be that long. It just felt a little bit long for me. It dragged a little bit in parts, but I love that so many people love that series. I do plan on carrying on with that series with Binding 13 or Keeping 13, whichever one the second one is, at some point. just to see if my opinions change. Lastly, the standout book for me this year, when it comes to a fun time, I needed this book more than I needed any book this year at all. I have told you on my other socials before, reading has saved my life this year after being suicidal towards the back of last year. And this book came to me at a time when I needed it the most. I don't have the physical copy because I borrowed that to my brother-in-law. I do have the physical copy because I bought it. It is that good. But it is Dungeon Crawler Carl by Matt Dinnerman. Now, this is the first time I had ever read a lit RPG. I had no idea what that genre of book was. Someone said to me, just read this book, it's a fun time. And it is, if you have ever gamed in your life before. It's a role-playing game in a book. And I'm about to explain to you what this book is about. Whether you like gaming or not, this book is for everybody. This story follows Carl, who is just an everyday man, and his ex-fiance's cat, Donut. They basically wake up one morning, go into the back garden for a cigarette. All of a sudden, the entire Earth is taken over by aliens. These aliens have converted the Earth into a dungeon crawler game for their own entertainment. Together, they've got to navigate different dungeon levels to hopefully be able to get to the end of the dungeon and win the game, which will give them control over Earth. Pacing in this book is just relentless. It's got twists and danger around literally every single corner. Dungeon setup just creates a series of some hilarious challenges, some unexpected challenges. It just kept me hooked from start to finish. I just wanted to see how Donut and Carl progressed. It's just such a unique concept. They face some of the most ridiculous sounding creatures I've ever heard in my entire life. Some of the dialogues between the creatures and the main characters are hilarious. Also, being lit RPG, if you don't know, there's a level-based system as well. So every character they come across, they gain XP for. P is experience. These experience points can be used to level up different character traits or skills. They find new loot. The loot might give them different strengths and hidden abilities. It is just so cool. It combines like a dystopian reality TV show to real life, I suppose, because it's on Earth. It's just wild. The book explores resilience, loyalty, friendship, absurdity of survival under the most ridiculous conditions. It also critiques reality TV and some of the things that happen in modern day society, exploring like the voyeuristic enjoyment of us as humans watching other people on TV suffer. Every chapter is a memorable moment. It is just, there are literally like belly chuckling laughter moments in this book. It's insane. I don't think I can give you a favourite moment in this book. It is just hilarious, like laugh out loud funny. The relationship between Carl and Princess Donut is just, I don't know what to say. It's insane. When I come to the main characters, as I said, Carl is your main character. He's human. He's a likeable guy. He's got quite a dry sense of humour. His cleverness, empathy is very matter of fact. He's very logical thinking. Watching him at least attempt to defeat the dungeon it's just a fun time. On the other hand, we have Princess Donut, the cat, who quickly in this book gains a voice. She is a very spoilt, dramatic cat. She is unexpectedly intelligent, I'd say. She just develops her own unique attributes, we'll say, quite early on. Charisma being one of them. She is charismatic. Just the ultimate diva. Carl has to rein her in all the time. One of the lines that he's forever saying is, "God damn it, Donut!" It is just so funny, I promise you. There are some really good NPCs, like I think it stands for non-playable characters. In the book, they'll have like safe rooms where they go to different rooms, so there's a lot of really funny characters that they come across and they meet, and they absolutely add to the story. They are hilarious. This book, the best way to describe this book is just a good time. And I'm not picking this book as my favourite book this year because it's just life-changing. I'm picking this book because of the amount of joy it brought me in a time that I needed it. I didn't expect much world building in this series, and it is there. The dungeon itself is multi-layered, so each floor has a different environment. On top of that, each floor is filled with different creatures, different traps. weird ecosystems. Each rule's got new rules and challenges as well. It's just so cool. Matt Dinnerman doesn't get lazy when it comes to the detail about the actual mechanics of how this world works as well. He is quite intricate with that. It comes to the leveling systems, when it comes to the achievements that the players gain from XP, from character kills and things like that. It's just so creative. I find the writing style just so easy to read. It just flows so naturally. The dialogue is perfect. When it comes to emotional impact, it made me happy. And as somebody that suffers really badly and is medicated for depression, suicidal thoughts and mental health problems, nothing can be a greater compliment to an author than saying, you saved me at a time that I needed it. And this book absolutely did that for me. The only reason I haven't started book 2 yet is, even though it's on Kindle Unlimited, I prefer reading physical copies. And it's about £20 that book, so I'm waiting for that. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video, because it took me a lot of time and effort to put this together, and I wanted to share with you some books that have changed my life this year. Because to some people, I understand that reading is just a bit of a hobby. For me, reading saved my life, and I like to put my love and joy of this fantastic art back out there to the world. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. As I said, I appreciate anyone that's watched this or engaged with this. As always, you know, if you've watched till this point, wow, thanks for finding me a bit entertaining, and I love you the most. And if you haven't subbed, just do it, because I've said this before, I need more friends. I love you so much. See ya!